My father-in-law collapsed at the table before anyone had a chance to touch their dessert. The room fell dead silent. A choking sound escaped his throat, then his spoon slipped from his hand, clinking sharply against the plate. His body slumped sideways, his head gently knocking against the back of the chair. His eyes closed. My mother-in-law, Carolyn, shot to her feet, stammering, "Frank? What's wrong with you?" It all happened in under 5 seconds. And then, no one knew what to do. I stayed seated. I'm Daniel Shaw, 33 years old, freelance photographer. I'm not the kind of person who draws attention at family gatherings, and definitely not the one people hope to see at a Mitchell family holiday. As everyone rushed around Frank, I simply watched, not him, but someone else in the room. That person didn't look back at me, but I saw it. Her hand clenched slightly when Frank collapsed. In every family, there are the ones who speak the most and the ones who quietly observe. I've always been in the second group. 3 years married to Claire, my wife, taught me to listen more than speak because the real things in her family are always said between the lines. Carolyn, my mother-in-law, never says anything directly. She doesn't have to. Her looks, her timing, the carefully chosen gifts, everything is calibrated to remind me that I don't quite fit the family standard. Daniel is independent, creative. I just hope Claire is strong enough to handle someone like that. That was her compliment the first dinner I ever attended. I smiled, said nothing. She thrives on control. Frank, her husband, never challenged her, at least not in front of the kids. Claire loves her mother, but I know there are times she feels like she's trapped between 2 brick walls, me on one side and her family on the other. Tonight, everything seemed normal, until Frank collapsed. No one knew why. He was in good health, had only sipped a light drink, eaten a small plate of roast chicken. Carolyn panicked and called for an ambulance. Claire's younger brother stammered trying to dial the number. Someone ran to get a cold towel. I stayed seated, calmer than I probably should have been, not because I didn't care, but because I had a feeling something was going to happen. Not random, not an accident. I scanned the room. Every face looked worried or pretended to, but one person didn't look scared enough. I made a mental note of it, didn't say a word. Frank was taken away. Non-life-threatening condition, said the EMT. The family slowly began to relax, but dinner had already died in silence. Everyone avoided eye contact. I stood up and helped clear the plates. Claire touched my hand gently and whispered, "Are you okay?" I nodded, but I wasn't honest. I was okay, but something was very clearly not. I used to believe that Claire was the best thing that ever happened to me, and I still believe that. But she came with a family, and with that family, I had to relearn a lot of things. When we first dated, I thought Carolyn, Claire's mother, was just the traditional type, controlling, distant, fond of vague remarks. But after the wedding, I began to understand. She wasn't just traditional. She was the operator of everything, of everyone. From how the dinner table was arranged, to where her daughter should live, what job she should take, and even when she should have kids, everything fell within Carolyn Mitchell's reach. Frank, my father-in-law, was a kind man. Quiet, perhaps too quiet next to his wife. He rarely spoke, occasionally tried to ease tension with humor, but it was clear he didn't make many of the decisions in his own home. My relationship with Claire's family always hovered at a polite distance. I didn't try to get close, nor did I want tension. I'm a photographer. I tell stories through images, not through long dinners filled with etiquette and subtext. Claire understood that, but she was raised in a home where order mattered more than emotion, where outer peace mattered more than inner truth. And because of that, sometimes she forgot. Not everyone sees silence as a long-term solution. I began noticing small things. For example, every time I mentioned a new project, Carolyn would forget to ask more. If Claire said a magazine had contacted me, Carolyn would change the subject. At our first anniversary dinner, she handed us an envelope. I assumed it was money or a handwritten note. It was a job listing for a full-time admin assistant position at an insurance office run by her friend. "In case you want something more stable," she said without blinking. I didn't react. I didn't feel the need to prove my worth to someone who defined stability as a desk job, a pension, and pastel-colored shirts. But one thing I couldn't ignore, Claire started getting tired. She was torn between me and her mother. The subtle digs, the just thinking about your future comments, the kind of advice that sounded like concern but felt like sabotage. Sweetheart, creative men are exciting, but I do wonder, are they built to last? Claire didn't argue, but I saw her eyes change. Then things started getting strange. 2 months before Thanksgiving dinner, I started feeling off. Lightheaded, odd headaches, restless sleep. I thought it was work stress, until I noticed a vitamin pill missing, though I was sure I hadn't taken it. The second time, I changed hiding spots. It still disappeared. I didn't tell Claire. I wasn't sure what was happening, and I didn't want to suspect family. But instinct, the kind you build when you live by reading through a lens, told me to be careful. I started taking notes. Not much, just a few lines each night. What did I drink? Who touched the glass? Who did the dishes? Who was nearby when I felt off? I found nothing concrete, just a feeling, growing stronger, that someone was testing something on me. Not out of hatred, but because they believed they had the right. Then came Thanksgiving dinner. Frank collapsed, and I wasn't surprised. I looked around, not to check his condition, but to study how the others reacted. Eyes, even for just a second, can say more than a lifetime of apologies. And one pair of eyes in that room didn't flinch, didn't panic, just observed. I didn't know who did what, but I knew one thing for sure. Someone in this family hadn't just crossed the line. They believed they could redraw it. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was shocked or worried about my father-in-law. According to the paramedic, Frank's condition was not serious. Possibly a blood pressure drop, maybe a medication interaction. Further tests needed. It was the kind of vague diagnosis that lets everyone breathe easier and quietly draws a curtain over what's really going on. I lay in the guest room, listening to the ticking of the wall clock. Each tick steady, like the breath of someone who can't quite rest. Claire was asleep after a long, tense day. She always gets exhausted being the bridge between me and her family. A role no one gave her, but she was somehow expected to fill. As for me, I just lay there. But in my mind, things were starting to connect. I quietly turned on my phone and opened the Notes app. Things I'd logged over the past 3 months. 14th, slight dizziness after lunch. No alcohol, suspect orange juice. 20th, missing one supplement pill, maybe a mistake. 2 months ago, Carolyn in the kitchen asked me to help clear the table. Supplement bottle missing afterward. Note, same strange feeling. After drinking chamomile tea, she handed me directly. At a glance, each note felt small, but when I lined them up chronologically, a pattern emerged. Someone had consistently offered me drinks or suggested what I should have. Always someone from the family, and always on the days I ended up feeling not quite right. Then I started thinking further. Not who did it, but why. I had no inheritance. Claire and I owed no money to anyone. We had no children. I wasn't a burden. So why? Then I remembered a dinner from over a year ago. Just Carolyn and me at the table, after Claire and the rest had gone upstairs. Daniel, she said while folding napkins. Some people steer their daughter's life off course and never realize it. I didn't reply, but her look when she said it wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. The next morning, I pretended to sleep in. At breakfast with Carolyn and Claire, I asked casually, "So, what did the doctor say last night? Wine or something else?" Carolyn gave a dry smile. Frank didn't drink much. Probably stress. He always gets like that at big family gatherings. Claire added, "Maybe it's the new medication. I think his doctor changed the prescription a couple weeks ago." I nodded, but I knew that medication had nothing to do with the fainting spell. I'd taken that drug myself. It doesn't cause that kind of reaction unless something else is involved. I needed more answers, but I couldn't investigate openly. In a family like this, silence is the only language that doesn't start a war. I texted Jason, my brother-in-law. He'd always been the only one in the Mitchell family who didn't look at me like I didn't belong. You got 5 minutes this weekend? There's something I want to ask about yesterday. He replied 10 minutes later. I was going to text you first. Let's meet. There's something. I think it's time you knew. That night I dug out my car's dash cam, the kind with motion sensors even when parked. Fortunately, or maybe thanks to my photographer instincts, I hadn't turned it off since arriving at the Mitchell house. I rewound to the previous afternoon. Angle of the kitchen through the window. Not crystal clear, but clear enough to see Carolyn reach for a tray of glasses, pull a small bottle from her pocket, and tilt it slightly. Just a second. But enough to know I wasn't imagining things. I still didn't know who switched the glass. I didn't see it. I didn't hear it. But I knew this. This wasn't a family mishap. It was deliberate. It had a pattern. It had history. And if I didn't stop it, the next person might not be as lucky as Frank. I met Jason at a small cafe in the woods, about a 20-minute drive from downtown Asheville. The place was quiet, anonymous. No one recognized anyone else, and no one in my wife's family had the patience to sit somewhere that didn't serve traditional breakfast. Jason arrived on time. He always did, not because of military discipline, but because in the Mitchell household, punctuality was the only way not to be labeled disrespectful. He ordered a black coffee. I just took tea. We sat in silence for a few minutes. No words, just the soft hiss of the espresso machine and jazz from an old radio. Finally, Jason spoke first. I won't wait for you to ask. I'll just say it. I looked at him and nodded. You're right to suspect something. There's something very wrong with the way Carolyn runs this family. And what happened to Frank the other night? It wasn't the first time. I held my breath. Jason told me a story no one had ever mentioned, at least not in front of me. 5 years ago, his ex-wife Emily had shown similar symptoms to mine. After a few months of rising tension with Carolyn, Emily started to experience strange issues. Insomnia, anxiety, occasional dizziness after family dinners. Once, she fainted right after leaving her mother-in-law's house. Doctors found nothing conclusive. But Jason, still trying to salvage the marriage at the time, secretly installed a mini camera in the kitchen. And what he saw, Carolyn pouring something into Emily's chamomile tea. You're not the first, Jason said slowly. But maybe you're the first one clear-headed enough to see the whole picture. He didn't tremble. He didn't accuse. He just regretted. I didn't say anything back then, Jason continued. Carolyn claimed it was just a herbal supplement. Emily didn't question it, but after she fainted, she insisted on moving out. 4 months later, they divorced. She never looked back. I stayed quiet. My tea had gone cold. I sometimes think, Jason said, if I had spoken up earlier, maybe things would have turned out differently. I looked him in the eye. You can still speak up. Right now. We left the cafe after nearly an hour. No need for many words. Jason handed me a USB. He said it contained the old footage. In case Carolyn ever believes she's the only one allowed to rewrite the truth. That evening, I opened the file. The video was grainy but unmistakable. Carolyn opens a cupboard, takes out a small unlabeled bottle, and pours a clear liquid into the teapot. No one saw. No one reacted. Only the camera. That night I sat next to Claire, laptop open but idle. She turned and asked, You're still thinking about yesterday, aren't you? I paused for a few seconds, then placed my hand on her shoulder. Claire, I need you to remember something. If one day you feel like something's wrong, but the whole world says you're imagining it, trust your instinct, even if it's about someone close, even if it's family. She frowned slightly, confused. Why are you saying that? No reason, I smiled faintly. I just want you to know, sometimes the scariest thing isn't bad people, but good people doing bad things while believing they're right. I didn't tell Claire everything. Not yet. Not because I wanted to hide anything, but because I knew some truths, if revealed too soon, don't save anyone. They just destroy everything. I needed more time. I needed to understand. why Carolyn did it. There had to be a reason, a motive. No one poisons their daughter-in-law or son-in-law without cause. And then a few days later, I found it. A psychological report scanned into an old file that Jason had included on the USB. Carolyn had once been treated for obsessive-compulsive personality disorder, OCPD, more than 20 years ago. Not a mental illness, but a way of living where the person genuinely believes only their way is the right way. The daughter must live like a proper woman. The husband must be strong, controlled, unwavering. Anyone who doesn't fit must be corrected or removed. I did it for your own good. A sentence I'm certain I'll hear from her one day. But when that day comes, I need to be ready. Not to accuse, but to protect Claire from her own mother's misguided sense of love. I didn't schedule a meeting with Carolyn. I just showed up. Saturday morning, while Claire took her father to a follow-up appointment after his collapse. I knew Carolyn would be home alone, and she would never turn down the chance for a civil conversation. She opened the door just like always, her face polite enough not to be called cold, but never warm enough to put me at ease. "Claire's not home," she said, without meeting my eyes. "I know," I replied. "I'm here to see you." She paused, like that line wasn't in any of the scripts she'd prepared. "Come in." Her tone switched, steady, cool, controlled. I sat on the sofa, where everything was in perfect order, books aligned, photos framed straight, flower vase symmetrically arranged. "Daniel, I don't know, but I think sons-in-law should understand boundaries." "Agreed," I said, "but I think mothers-in-law should too." She narrowed her eyes, said nothing. I reached into my bag and placed a USB drive on the table. "This is the video of you pouring tea for Emily back then." No sound, no sharp intake of breath. She didn't even glance at the USB, only at me. "Jason gave you that?" I didn't confirm, didn't deny. "You know what's scarier than you doing that?" I said calmly. "It's the fact that you genuinely believe you were right." For the first time, her eyes flickered. "I never did anything to hurt Claire," she replied. "I know," I said. "But you did everything to control her and me through the smallest things. Your words, your pills, your looks, your silence." She pressed her hands tighter in her lap than usual. "I'm not here to destroy this family, Carolyn, but I'm not letting Claire be controlled anymore." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't threaten. I spoke like someone who'd seen the whole picture. If there's one more incident, even a veiled comment, I won't hold anything back. Not just the video. There are logs, health data, cameras. And I won't tell Claire. I'll tell your doctor, then your lawyer. For a split second, I saw fear in her eyes. But just for a second. She stood up immediately. "I think this conversation is over." "I think so too," I said, rising. "But you should know. This isn't a threat. It's a boundary, and it won't move." I left the house without looking back. I didn't need to. I knew she wouldn't act again, because people like Carolyn fear losing control more than anything else in the world. That night, Carolyn sent a message in the family group chat. "Thanks everyone for your concern about Frank. The doctor says he just needs rest. Also, I won't be hosting Christmas this year. My health won't allow it. Hope you all understand." No one responded, but I knew. That was the only kind of admission she was capable of. No apology, no guilt. Just withdrawal. Claire asked me later, "What did you say to Mom?" I took her hand slowly. "I said that from now on, no one gets to decide our lives for us, not even if they say it's out of love." She didn't ask more, just nodded, and leaned her head on my shoulder. For the first time in 3 years, I saw Claire let go. She wasn't holding the middle, wasn't maintaining the peace. She was just herself. We sat there in our small apartment, watching the streetlights flicker outside the window. Frank had recovered. Carolyn had gone quiet. And I knew. Things couldn't go back to the way they were. But maybe they didn't need to. Silence for people like Carolyn has never meant acceptance. It's just a form of strategic retreat. And I was right. 3 weeks after our conversation at her house, when I thought I had drawn a clear boundary, things started shifting again. Not from her directly, but from someone else. My father-in-law, Frank. Frank invited me out for lunch. That wasn't common, so I agreed. We met at a quiet steakhouse, the same one he used to take Claire to when she was in high school. He didn't beat around the bush. Daniel, I think you're making things more tense than they need to be. I set my knife down and looked at him, not surprised. What do you mean? I know you said something to Carolyn. She's been silent since that day, not seeing anyone, not calling. I know she was wrong. But this is family. Everyone has flaws. You can't take someone's mistake and use it to break an entire relationship. I paused, then asked, so you think that if Carolyn intentionally harmed someone, as long as no one died, we should just call it imperfect? Frank looked at me, not angry, but not agreeing either. I think the truth is never as simple as you believe. He didn't know about the video, didn't know about the pills, didn't know what happened with Emily. And maybe he didn't want to know, because knowing meant doing something. And doing something meant confronting the woman who had run his household for over 30 years. I didn't blame Frank, but I knew this much. Carolyn hadn't given up. She had only changed her tactics. I left the restaurant certain of one thing. This time, she wouldn't confront me directly. She would do what she did best. Flip the narrative, make the victim look like the aggressor. 2 days later, Claire got a message from our family doctor, someone both of us had used in the past. The message asked her to confirm Daniel's recent mental state because someone in the family had expressed concern that I was showing signs of paranoia and prolonged insomnia. Claire's face went pale. She handed me the phone. I just gave a quiet laugh. She's really trying to script this now. I called the doctor, who knew my medical history well. There's no medical reason to doubt my mental health, right? None at all, he replied. I only asked because Carolyn called personally. She sounded genuinely concerned. A few days later, Claire was called into an unexpected meeting at work about a potential conflict of interest involving her family. It stemmed from a major client of her mother's consulting business. You see it, right? Claire asked. She's infiltrating every layer of our life. I nodded. When she can't control behavior, she'll control the environment. And if she can't prove I'm wrong, she'll make everyone think I am. That night, I opened my laptop. No emails, no lawyers. I just reviewed the video clips, audio recordings, and text logs Jason had sent. Layer after layer of evidence, neatly arranged like the wedding photo edits I used to sort in Lightroom. I created a document, not to send, but to keep, a sort of preventive legacy in case Carolyn decided to play her final card. The next morning, I sent her a simple message. I know you're trying new tactics. I'm not here to fight, but I'm ready if I have to be. And this time, I'm not speaking alone. No reply, none needed. Claire looked at me, gripping my hand. I think I need to talk to Mom directly. No, I said, shaking my head. We don't need to convince people who always believe they're right. We just need to keep the truth in its place and let them get tangled in their own lies. Claire met her mother on a Tuesday afternoon. Not the weekend, not dinner, no family, no husband, no one else to interfere. A quiet outdoor cafe by the lake. Carolyn arrived on time, as always. Light makeup, scarf neatly tied, eyes sharp, as if she had never admitted being wrong in her life. Claire stood to greet her, but didn't hug. That was the first sign, and Carolyn noticed. How are you, dear? Same as always, Claire replied, her tone flat. And you? Feeling okay, asking my doctor to check on my husband like that? Carolyn pursed her lips. She hadn't expected such a direct hit. I was just concerned. Daniel's been acting odd lately. I thought, no, Claire cut in. You weren't concerned. You tried to discredit him. Carolyn leaned back slightly, breathing slowly. Claire, I'm your mother. I have the right to protect you from people who might steer you wrong. You used to be my mother, Claire said, eerily calm. But you no longer have the right to decide how I live, who I love, or what I believe in. Carolyn went quiet for a few seconds. You think I hurt Daniel? Claire looked directly at her. I don't think, I know. And so do you. Carolyn froze. The name Emily came up for the first time in their conversation. Claire dropped it like a small knife, not to wound, but to cut open something both had avoided for years. I know what you did to Emily and to Daniel. I've seen the video. Not once, not by mistake. Carolyn's hand trembled slightly. She masked it by picking up her coffee cup. It was empty. Why did you do it? Claire asked. Not just once, not out of anger, but calculated, repeated, and always pretending like nothing happened. Carolyn spoke slowly, as if trying to convince herself, because I was afraid you'd choose wrong, afraid you'd end up with someone too weak to protect you, afraid you'd live like I did, carrying a whole family on your back, unnoticed. Claire paused. For the first time in her life, she saw her mother tired, not physically, mentally. A woman who had spent her entire life holding everything together, to the point she felt entitled to control others, because she was terrified she had once chosen wrong herself. And I thought you, of all people, would understand, Carolyn said. You've always been quiet, always tried to keep peace. I thought you'd understand why I did what I did. You were wrong, Claire replied. I wasn't quiet because I understood you. I was quiet because I didn't have the courage to step away from you. A long moment passed. Neither spoke. Just the wind across the lake, carrying the feeling of a season beginning to change. I don't hate you, Claire said softly, but I won't let you destroy what I'm building anymore. I don't need your approval for my life. I just need you to step back. Carolyn looked at her daughter as if seeing a woman she didn't recognize. And that was true, she never had. I won't go to the police. I won't make a scene. But if anything happens again, anything, I won't stay quiet. Carolyn stood up. No goodbye, no apology. She picked up her purse, adjusted her scarf, and walked away, like someone retreating from a battle she knew she couldn't win. Claire stayed a few minutes longer. Didn't cry, didn't tremble. She just breathed. For the first time in years, she breathed as herself. That night, Claire told me everything, every detail of the conversation. When she finished, I said nothing. I just stood up and held her, tightly, and I thought, no need to accuse, no need to retaliate. All you need is to give the truth a place to stand. And that's enough. 6 months later. Summer came early in Asheville. Trees grew thick along the winding mountain roads, and in our small apartment, light slipped through the window slats as if, finally, everything was quiet enough to be seen clearly. There were no calls from Carolyn, no texts, no sudden family matters to attend to. She had stepped back, not with an apology, but in a way that was intentional. And for us, that was enough. Claire changed. Not loudly, not dramatically. She no longer needed to be pleasant in anyone's eyes. She started writing again, blog entries she never published, just to reorganize her own thoughts. She cleaned out the apartment, getting rid of the gifts from her mother that, for 10 years, she hadn't felt brave enough to pack away. She did small things, but at the right moments. It was like finally living without asking permission. As for me, I went back to work, shooting less, but with more focus. I chose clients as carefully as I chose my words. No more chasing things to prove my worth. I didn't need to anymore. One night, I found an old envelope in my desk drawer. The label read, Daniel, open only if absolutely necessary. I'd forgotten I'd written it, probably after that conversation with Carolyn. I opened it, just a single note, written in black ink. If one day you realize you've gone too far just to prove you were right, remember, some people always knew you were. They just needed time to see it clearly. And when they do, don't be bitter that they came late. Be glad they came at all. I folded the letter. Not sad, not smug, just light. Frank called once in the 6 months. He said, "Thank you for not turning it into a mess." I replied, "I don't need chaos to protect what's worth keeping." Carolyn still lived in the same house, still cleaned on schedule, still sent birthday gifts to Claire each year, though she no longer attended the celebrations. None of us expected her to change. She didn't need to repent. She just needed to stop breaking people in the name of love. One late summer afternoon, Claire and I walked around the lake. She asked, "Do you think it'll happen again? That quiet kind of control?" I squeezed her hand gently. "It always comes back. in different forms, from different people. But this time, we know what it looks like. The things that ruin us aren't the big mistakes. They're the small interferences, repeated again and again, wrapped in concern, protection, and just wanting what's best. The scariest thing isn't a bad person. It's a person who believes they're doing good, while harming others systematically, and no one dares to speak up. I once stayed silent. Then I spoke up. Not by yelling, not by exposing, just by being consistent, clear, uncompromising. And that, turns out, was enough to hold on to the rest of life. Not a conclusion, just a small note. If you've made it this far, maybe you've been treated like I was. Or maybe you were Claire. Or maybe you were Carolyn. Whoever you are, I want you to remember this. Silence isn't weakness. And speaking up doesn't mean war. Sometimes all it takes is saying the right thing and standing still just long enough that the world has to stop and see you.